Hey friend, how are you doing today? I hope that it is an incredible day for you. And today I don't have any painting to show you. I'm just gonna go through what it takes to paint a pumpkin. And I have this big old piece of watercolor paper here, and I'm just gonna show you, just give you a few ideas on a couple different ways that you can approach your pumpkins, and just the way to think about them as you're painting them. So I'm going to use a few simple colors today. I have some orange and some black and some white and brown here. And you know how I roll. I'm just using super simple supplies from the dollar store. I get these at Dollarama or Dollar Tree or any of the dollar places. I'm in Canada, so wherever your dollar stores are. And the main three brushes I always use, so I just always have these on hand. I have a 3/4 inch flathead brush. I like to call this my Fatty McFatterson flathead. I have my 1/2 inch flathead brush, which is a smaller version of my big brush. And I have a nice long liner brush. And these are the main tools I use for any pumpkin painting process. So grab those up. I mean, I always have a cup of water and a paper plate and a paper towel to wipe my brushes on. But besides that, basically I'm gonna show you the anatomy of a pumpkin. If you want to do like a really loose rustic pumpkin, or if you want a super smooth, really fancy looking pumpkin, really nice, smooth sailing looking pumpkin. So grab up those supplies and let's get this party started. Now I'm just going to get a little bit of each color onto my plate. White, black, brown, and orange. I'm not even sure how much black I'm going to use. Usually I just use orange and brown and white, but black can come in handy as well. And I haven't really made up a plan, but I know that pumpkin painting can be a little bit trivial sometimes. So I'm just going to take you step by step how I make a pumpkin and kind of the different ways we can do that. All right, so first things first, grab your big old brush. And we're going to make an orange pumpkin. I'm going to start over on this side over here. And the way I personally start my pumpkins out is I'm going to just grab a little water. I'm going to grab a little orange paint with my brush. And I decide where my pumpkin sides are going to be. Pumpkins can be all different shapes and sizes. But I always leave the middle empty for my stem to put on later. Okay, so on one side, totally apple-shaped, I'll do one side of my pumpkin. And then I hop over an inch or two, and I'll do the other side of my pumpkin. Okay, and from that point, I decide where the pumpkin lumps are going to be. I'm going to put a lump. I just use the side of my brush while I'm doing this. I'm just going down all the way to the bottom. Okay, so one fatal mistake I often see with pumpkin making is we'll start to make these lumps. So I'm going to put one over here too. But everybody starts to shorten up their lumps. So this is a mistake I often see. And then we'll make that center lump, which is on both sides. So then I see people starting to do one of these. And as they grow into the middle, they start to get smaller and smaller, but that's not what we want. We want all of our lumps to go all the way down to the bottom of our pumpkins. And the lumps on the bottoms of the pumpkins are bumpy too. So we got a little bump there, little bumps in the center of our pumpkin, on the tops of our pumpkin here. Like these are all little lumpies, okay, that are going to happen with time. And generally, that's how I get started on any pumpkin that I paint. Step number 2, when I'm painting my pumpkin. So there's 2 things we need to look out for when we're pumpkin painting. There's the lumps of the pumpkin. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lumps. Now, all the tops of our lumps are the things that kind of get hit by the sun. So the tops of our lumps are going to be a little brighter. And the crevices or the cracks in our lumps are going to be a little darker. So the first thing I do is I'm going to grab some orange, and whenever I'm painting my pumpkin in, I just do it one lump at a time, but I always start at the top and I follow the shape of the pumpkin as I'm coloring it in. And especially when you're using a big brush, you can start at this point here and follow the lump all the way down to the bottom. Now, because we're using a brush, you can already see pumpkins have like this veininess in them. They have these like little stripes in them that can be subtle or not, but generally we already start to see that happen as we start to bring our brush and follow along and color in towards the crack of our pumpkin. Now the crack is darker than the rest. So in the crack, it's going to get darker. So with the already orange that I have on my paintbrush, that was really hard to say, the orange that I already have on my paintbrush, whatever brush side is going to be swooping along that last edge of my lump, which would be this side because it's going to be along that edge, I'm going to grab a corner of brown, and that's a lot of brown. I'm going to take a little corner of brown, see? So I have orange on the rest of my brush and brown just on that little corner of my brush there. And I'm going to follow that inside lump. And now my brain knows that that's where the dark spot's going to be. Now, if I have a little left over on my brush, I'll go back and forth a couple times and kind of pull upwards, because the bottom of our lumps are dark, the crack is dark, but the top is going to be light. So for the next one, I'm going to grab some orange with my brush, and I'm going to make sure the orange cruises right next to my brown. Okay, so I'm going to get up there. I'm going to cruise right next to my brown paint. And same thing, I'm going to pull all the way down to the bottom, all the way down. And then once I get to the next crack, I'm going to grab a corner of brown and I'm going to follow that crack. And I have a little left over. I'm just going to pull it back up into my lump. Ta-da! So again, grab some orange. Now for the center of my pumpkin, my middle pumpkin lump, I'm just going to leave it be for now. I'm just going to paint it completely orange. And I'm going to hop over to the outside lump. Okay, so grabbing my paintbrush, I'm going to follow the shape of my pumpkin. When I get to the crack, I'm going to grab a little brown with the other side, because I'm using the other side of my paintbrush now. And I'm going to follow the crack and then pull whatever leftover brown I have up into my pumpkin. Last one, little orange. I'm going to go right next to my brown. I'm not going to cover my brown. I'm going to go right next door to it. All the way down again. And then grab that little bit of brown and I'm going to cruise right along that crack line. Okay, so that's a pretty good start, right? Pumpkin doesn't look great, but we can see where all the lumps are supposed to be, okay? And this is a really great opportunity to really understand that every lump has its own little life. We have the bright top part of our lump and we have the dark crack or crevice before the next lump starts. So to highlight our pumpkin lumps, we can use a little bit of white. We can grab a little bit of white with our brush and pull in a little white on the tops of our lumps, right next to the brown, and even on our center lump here, to really brighten up those top areas of our pumpkin. We can do the same thing with the brown. we can grab a little bit of brown and we can darken up the bottom parts of our pumpkin with a little bit of brown. And that's a pretty simple way to make a pumpkin. Now, I always wait till the end to put the stem on because I like there to be a little bit of a hole there. But I just want to go through one thing before we do that. So often, like if we were to look at this pumpkin, I'm going to actually just, because it's a small pumpkin, I'm going to grab my smaller brush. And the stem of your pumpkin is kind of like a little tree trunk, right? So just if you start inside that first little crevice, the first little part of your lump there, and pull up and make like a little tree trunk, that's a perfect little stem. And stems can be all sorts of different shapes and sizes and lengths and widths and all the sort of things. But I suggest starting in your first crack and then making this little tree stump. But all the roots of the tree are going to go in between every little crack of your pumpkin. So this will go around the outside of my lump and into the next crack, outside of the lump and into the next crack and into the next. And this is going to give you a nice looking stem that looks like it's, you know, when you grab a pumpkin and that stem's really in there, it's like inside. That's kind of what I'm thinking when I'm putting these stems, inserting them in through the cracks. So we're going around the lumps and into the cracks of our pumpkin, right? And this point of view right here is really great because we're looking at the pumpkin and it's a straight on view. But sometimes, you know, we're up above the pumpkin and we can really see like the top of the pumpkin. And if you want that to happen, all you have to do is put a lump at the back. So you can take your brush, sorry about my angle here, but take your brush and add a lump into the background. I'm going to color it orange to start, but the same rules apply. So on each side of this lump in the background, you could even make it taller than that to really make it look like it's you can even put a couple lumps back there if you want to. Like it's really in there. We're really getting a good top view. But same rules apply. So there's still, like you still have the bright part of this lump here, but you want to see that the little brown crack in your pumpkin. So we're gonna make sure that we can see some of the brown coming up from this lump here and some of the brown coming up from this lump here and up from the center, because that's where the dark is, where our stem is. And same rules apply. We want a nice little brightness at the top of our lump, so adding a little brightness at the tops here too, really give it the quality that we're looking down inside of our pumpkin. Now, as for the stem, you can totally, you know, like I said, stems can be, this is a nice little perfect stem, but stems can kind of cruise up. They have different shapes. They can be long and drawn. They can, you know, curl out and have more vine attached to them. But they also go into these back places too. So if you want to add a little corridor of, you know, brown into those cracks too, you totally can make it really look like you're really into that pumpkin. Now you can see that this pumpkin is really loose. This is a really loose pumpkin. We made it really, really quickly. But look how artistic it is. It's got lots of, we get those defined cracks. We get those defined tops of our lumps. This is a cool looking pumpkin and would suit any kind of crafty, any kind of folk arty type painting, this pumpkin would be absolutely perfect for. Now, I'm going to go through the same process again, but this time I'm actually going to make a really smooth looking pumpkin. So I'm going to start with my big brush again and go through the same process. All right. So check this out. I'm going to try and keep it legit. I'm going to go and do it over on this other side here. So I'm going to start off with a lump here. And this time I'm actually going to make it a little bit of a misshapen pumpkin. So I'm going to make a small little lump here, and I'm going to pop over, and I'm going to make like kind of like a wonky lump over here, because pumpkins are all different shapes and sizes, right? And then same deal, I'm going to decide where my pumpkin lumps are going to go. And you can also put on the back lump too if you want. I'm going to put a couple lumps back here. And leave space for my stem in the middle, because that's where it goes down there in the center. Now this one I would like to call, it's more of a rustic pumpkin, right? Like we have a lot of the details, and I love when it's super loose and airy like that. But if you want a really nice, smooth pumpkin, you're going to have to blend a little bit better. So I'm going to start by just grabbing my orange, and I'm going to follow along those edges. Okay. Now, because I'm on watercolor paper, I'm just probably going to use a little bit more water than this than if I were to be on a canvas. Okay, so this is just practice. Watercolor paper really absorbs the water, and that's why they call it that. But same deal. So I'm going to grab a little, so I've painted this in orange. I'm going to grab a little corner of brown with my brush, and instead of just doing one solid swoop down like this, I'm going to start to bring my brush back and forth, and I'm going to really blend those colors together. So it's going to be really dark in the crack, in the crevice. Now you can use black for this as well. It doesn't just have to be brown. It's really dark in the crevice. And then I'm also going to take my brush, while my paint is still a little wet, while my orange is still a little wet, I'm going to slowly bring up my brown into my pumpkin lump here. And it's going to start to kind of turn my pumpkin brown a little bit. But I want it to be nice and smooth. So I'll rinse that brown off. And while it's still, the paint's still relatively wet, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to start to offset it with a little bit more orange. And I'm going to use my orange and brown. I keep making this pumpkin bigger and bigger because my brush is too big for this, that's why. And smooth out any of the dark and light colors together. So when I bring my brush back and forth, those colors blend super nicely together. And voila, we have a nice blended inside and a nice blended bottom, okay? Now we want that bright top part. I'm actually just for now, I'm gonna use my smaller brush because this big brush it's too big for this little pumpkin that I'm making right now. But same deal, so I wanna take the white and add it to the top, but I want it to be nice and smooth. So I'm gonna continue to kind of go back and forth with my brush all along the top area of my lump. And the more I go back and forth with my brush, the more the two colors are going to come together. Again, I need to offset all of that white, so I'm going to grab a little bit of orange and I'm going to get back in and start blending it in with a little bit more orange. So I have a nice bright top on it and a nice dark crevice. And basically, I just keep going back and forth until I'm really happy with the blending that I've done. So this takes a little bit more time, a little bit more patience until I get my blends really nice the way I want them to be. All right, so I'm going to do that again with the next lump. So put a little bit more orange on my plate. Grab that orange and I'm going to go right next to my lump here. So, sorry, right next to the crack of my pumpkin. So you can see that difference. Like that's a really, really deep crack of pumpkin lump right there, okay? Same deal, put some orange on. I'm going to grab that brown and go back and forth right in that crack. And I'm going to bring my brush back and forth until I really like how it's blended together. So up and down, and I'm following the shape of the crack. I'm following the shape of the lump. I'm not, just going up to the top and back down and making sure that these blends are doing what I want them to do. And the more I go back and forth with my brush, it's going to take down the darkness of my crack, but I'm still getting a nice blend. So I can always go back there and darken that center area up a little bit if I want to. And once it starts to dry a little bit, I can always go back in and kind of pop a little bit more darkness in the bottom here for some more like dramatic tones. And then adding a little bit of white at the top, blending that in with my orange. And if all the orange goes away, you can always take a little bit more orange and kind of merge the two areas together just by pulling back and forth with your brush. Now, as things dry, paint overlaps each other a little bit nicer. So if your white lumps aren't nice enough, you can always get back in there and add a couple little extra white strokes to really get those nice pops of color in the top. But it's really like an ebb and a flow. So it depends on how you want your pumpkin. If you want a beautiful, nice, smooth pumpkin, it's just going to take a little longer and a little bit more blending. But a nice rustic pumpkin goes a long way. So I'm going to continue along and do every bump here, and then we can compare. The two pumpkins when they're done, okay? So here we go. So now for my center lump, it's a little different than the rest because we are dealing with two sides. So we already have the crevices done on either side of our middle lump here, that central lump, the one that we kind of get the center view of. So the main parts we need to focus on for that center pumpkin lump is getting a little bit of darkness from the bottom. So if you grab your brown and pull up from the bottom, and it's going to start to mix together, and then I'll bring the two colors together like this. And just like the other ones, I'm going to have to probably darken it up a little bit more at the bottom, but same deal, only from the top, we're going all the way across the top, not just on one side or the other, all the way across. And then I can grab my little bit of orange and get in there and swoosh between the two, the top little white or light part and the bottom dark part. Once it starts to dry a little bit, I can grab a little bit more brown. And, you know, get in there and darken up these areas a little bit. But I'm really just using a little bit of paint at a time because I really want it to be a nice blend. So when I'm adding these extra pieces of dark brown from the bottom, I'll take a little extra orange and make sure that I'm getting a little bit more of a blend as opposed to like just like a shadow color, because I want it to be nice and blendy. So I'll do the same over here, you know, grab that little bit of brown from the bottom. Then slowly just bring in a little bit of orange so that I can get a nice little blend with my brush here. So we'll start with the shadows. And then I'm still going to do these two up here. So I got my two little lumps coming in from down here. I'm going to grab some of my brown. Now, with these back lumps, I know that there's going to be a stem poking through there. So I know that I'm probably going to lose a lot of this brown that I'm putting in the center, but I still want to have the integrity of that being there, so I will put it in. And then I'll also do the same with my white and pull it in from the top. And then just grab a little bit of orange and cruise right in between there to give it a nice seamless look. All right, cool. So while we let it dry for just a second, I can go ahead and grab my brown and create a stem. And like I said, I like to start with these two. I'll start on each side in these two little pops here. So pops, these two little crevices. So I'll pop it up from here, pop it up from here, and wherever it brings me, whatever kind of stem you want to put in there, you totally can. But I'm always going around the outside of the top of my pumpkin lumps and getting them into those little cracks to make it look relatively authentic. Ta-da! All right, so with that said, it depends on your level of how vibrant you want the tops of your pumpkins to be and how dark you want the lower pumpkins to be. So look at the comparison here. We have this beautiful dark or beautiful rustic, really kind of loose pumpkin, and then you can get to a point where it's like this really like detailed pumpkin. And this is far from perfect, but it just goes to show you like either way is great. This one's kind of cool because you can see how you can work with the different sized bumps and lumps and shapes of your pumpkins and still get a really kind of like cool view and style out of it. Really just depends on how much blending you want to do. And that's it. Now, if I wanted to, I could go back in and really brighten up these top parts of my pumpkins to really make it look like they're really bright at the top. And I would do that. I grab some white and I grab some more orange and I go back and forth again to really brighten it up at the top. But that just means I need to go back in and make sure that that's re-blended with my crack. So I need to get back in there with the crack, go back and forth, and blend the two colors together. All right, so it really depends on how much work you want to do. I'm going to leave that up to you. All right, so last but not least, I'm going to freshen up my napkin here. And we are going to come back and do one last pumpkin in the background. We're going to make a white pumpkin. So white pumpkins are the same as orange pumpkins, only we only use 2 colors instead of 3. And I just want to let you know that you can replace the orange with any color you want. You can use green, yellow, brown, red, turquoise. You can make all sorts of different pumpkins using the same techniques, just different colors. But for a white pumpkin, we generally, just use white and brown, but we can throw in a little bit of black in there too, just to kind of really give it some really defined details, okay? So with this next pumpkin, I'm gonna make a white pumpkin in behind these guys. And I'm gonna start, because I'm just on a white background, I'm gonna start by using a little mixture of white and brown. I'm just gonna make like a light brown to start. And just like the rest of them, decide where my pumpkin lumps are gonna be. Now, instead of doing a short pumpkin like this, I'm gonna do a big tall pumpkin. But I do the same way. I start in the middle and I'm gonna go down on either side. And this doesn't make sense strategically. You know what? Here, let's make it make sense. Let's make it make sense so this whole thing makes. So this would actually be, if it's behind there, it would be coming out, let's say here, okay? So got our 2 pumpkin lumps attached in the middle. And then again, I'm working in behind these pumpkins. So sometimes when you hit the pumpkin, you gotta like stop, hop over it, and then connect it from the bottom. That's just the way it goes. So one more, I'm gonna put this middle, really thin, lumpy right there. I'm actually gonna bring it up a little bit further. And that's why I like to do this first, because if you map out where your pumpkin lives first, then it's a lot, like you can always like grow out the sides. There's still ways to fix your pumpkin if you want to like change the shape or the size of your lumps inside your pumpkin, okay? And then one last one up at the top. I'm gonna just pop that up there. And there we go. That's gonna be our pumpkin shape this time, all right? So just like last time, but instead of using orange, I'm gonna take a nice big scoop of white and I'm gonna follow my lump. Now, because we're on a white paper, you're like, okay, I'm actually gonna cover up that top lump there. But same deal, I'm gonna follow the shape all the way down to the bottom. And I'm gonna grab a corner of brown and I'm gonna mix it in to the crevice. Normally, if I were to make a painting like this, I would do this pumpkin first because I'm really at risk of getting my brush strokes into this upper pumpkin. So if I would have done this one first, I could have just gone over top. So I'll probably, you know, if this were a real painting, I'd have to fix up this pumpkin here. But same deal. Taking my white, put that on, taking my brown, adding it into the cracks. And however you want to do it, you can do it rustic styles or you can do it blended styles. It's up to you. And generally, I'm just taking my brown and adding it in from the bottom, making sure that all of my dark parts are taken care of. And because my pumpkin's white, if I have a little extra brown on my brush, I'm gonna kind of bring it into the entire lump, but I still want it to be darker in the crack. So make sure your crack is dark, but as you kind of move away from it, feel free to bring that brown into the entire lump of the pumpkin, all right? For now, trust me on this, trust me in this process, all right? Okay, so I'm gonna do it again. So this time I'm gonna take my white and I'm gonna go right next to that darker crack. Try and brighten that up a bunch. And as I move towards the crack, I'm gonna grab that brown and blend it in. And because I'm blending, I'm just gonna bring some of that brown up into the entire, gonna mix it in with my white as I move over to the left-hand side. And then take a little bit of extra brown and swoop it in the bottom. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna hop over to this side and do the same thing again. White first. So basically when we're making a white pumpkin, we're making kind of like a taupe pumpkin because, okay, I caught a little glitch with my camera, but I'm still working on my pumpkins. So, you know, we're putting that brown in and we're making sure that all of our cracks are nice and brown. It sounds hilarious when you say it over and over again like that. Looking for some brown cracks, baby, this evening. Okay, so last but not least, our center. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to do this guy first. I'm going to grab some white and then I'm going to grab my brown. I'm going to pop it up from the center, get it in that crack, get in those cracks. Paint a little white. So, you know, the general consensus is that the tops of our pumpkin lumps are still brighter, even though they have a little bit more brown in them than the white that our white pumpkin is supposed to have, right? And as long as it's a little brighter than the actual crevice of our pumpkin, we're doing very good. So last but not least, this last lump here, just like the other ones, you know, we already have the darkness on both sides, so this gets a little trickier. Nice rounded lump at the top. And then I'm going to take my brown and I'm going to pop it up in from the bottom. And as I start to get up into the lump, you know, I don't want there to be too much brown, but whatever little excess, I'm just going to kind of streak it in from the bottom up. All right. So that's a pretty messy looking pumpkin. We're kind of on the trajectory of doing like a very rustic pumpkin right now with our white pumpkin here. So all I'm really looking for is I really want to make sure that the crevices of my pumpkins are really, really defined and that I have a nice bright highlight on the tops. So the first thing I'm going to do, now that I have the shape and everything's all colored in, got to grab a little bit of brown and I'm going to make sure that my brush is nice and flat. I'm going to flatten it out on my plate. And just using that like straight edge of my brush, I'm going to get into those cracks and just give them a little extra line of color. So this kind of fixes up any edges, all right? Anywhere where that last little bit of white paint would have got in. It darkens up our crevices, and I always start from the bottom and work my way up, because as I work my way to the top, I want it to get thinner, and I just kind of like let it go at the top. I don't really ever, you know, put a big thick line the whole way. So I start at the bottom, I work my way to the top, and I let it go as I kind of shoop, swoop off to the races. Then I'm going to take whatever extra brown and I'm going to darken up those bottom areas. So as I'm working around my pumpkin over here, usually I pull upwards, but since I have this like, you know, stop sign there, basically, I have to figure out a way to get around it without completely ruining my first pumpkin. And pulling up that little bit of darkness from the bottom. Getting it all vibey. Pulling up some extra bits of brown from the bottom up. Okay. And then naturally, to offset it, I'm going to grab some bright white and I'm just going to cruise down the outside edges of my lumps. So I'm still going to keep some of that brownie tone in there, but I really want to accentuate the real top parts of my pumpkin lumps to really show that this is actually a white pumpkin, not a brown pumpkin. So I'm going to take some nice bright white, cruise along those top edges, and just really, really brighten it up there. Now, just like before, you know, it's like you can take this to any degree. You can get really, really blendy with it, or you can keep it really chill and like super rustic and kind of really loosey-goosey if you want. It's really up to you. Either way, I feel like the more kind of strokes and streaks that you have in your pumpkin, the more kind of little like lines and nooks and crannies, it just makes for a fun painting in general. So don't, you know, discount just kind of throwing the colors in there and letting them be. And you can legit work on a pumpkin forever. You can add some more darkness, add some more lightness, bring in the blend, bring in the this. It's really up to you and your level and what kind of painting you're making. Now, last but not least, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to throw in my stem. And I'm just going to throw in a little guy up here so we can see that whole lump in the background. But as far as like painting a white pumpkin is concerned, you can totally do it with the two colors. Just getting in those crevices. Okay. But if you really, really want to like super distinct white pumpkin, just grabbing a little bit of black, or actually mixing a little black and white together, making like a little bit of a gray, that can help really define some of those like bottom areas of your lumps. So little crevice enhancement can really help the contrast of your painting. And obviously, outlining it will do the same. There we go. All right, so just a couple different ways to look at it. You know, you can get really rustic with it. You can use just a couple different colors. You can get really blendy with it. Any way you decide to do your pumpkin is going to be perfect. And I hope this gave you a little bit of insight. Now, when you're, just to kind of finish it off, when you're painting any kind of pumpkins, just make sure, you know, we need that like little bit of shadow underneath. So don't forget to make sure it's actually sitting on something. I'm just grabbing a little brown and shuffling it underneath. Make sure that there's a little bit of like dirt where our pumpkins are living. And that's it. So if you are kind of grasping the concept and you want to take your pumpkin painting further, I highly suggest you either go to my tutorials page and find a really nice pumpkin painting that you can follow along to, follow a nice tutorial where I bring you through the whole process. Or you can always join the Julie's Paint Party virtual membership. We have the virtual hub that has so many awesome fall and lots of pumpkin paintings. We're moving into winter, so lots of winter paintings, and there's a plethora of things that you can learn and take with you so that you become the best painter that you can be. I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial, and I hope to see you soon. Now, let me know if you've done this. Go into the Julie's Paint Party Facebook group, the public Facebook group, and say, hey, I tried out these pumpkins. Let me know how it goes. I want to hear from you. But until then, have such an amazing day and stay creative. All right?